Morning, everyone.
Good morning,
Good morning, Rabbi.
Freilich and Chanukah. We are in Mishnah Shabbos, Perkach Gimel, chapter 23, Mishnah Daled, Mishnah 4. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Miss Shlomis Rabinowitz, Shlomis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Okay. Ma'achshichen ala tachum lefakeach al iskei chala. We are permitted to wait by the Shabbos boundary until dark in order to take care of needs of a kala. So yesterday we were talking about how the laws regarding the fact that on Shabbos we cannot go 2,000 cubits outside of the city limits. So sometimes a person would want to wait before Shabbos ends, wants to wait at that point before it ends and wait for Shabbos to end. So when Shabbos ends, he could go further. And we talk about when you can do that, when you can't do that. So we're now continuing and giving an example of where we can do it based on the opinion of Abba Shaul mentioned at the end of yesterday's Mishnah. Abba Shaul said that anything that I can talk about on Shabbos, I can talk about doing on Shabbos, I can wait at the border until dark. And therefore, that meant to say that if we're talking about a matter of a mitzvah, since I can talk about on Shabbos about needs of a mitzvah for after Shabbos, even though those needs would involve something I can't do on Shabbos, but being that it's for the needs of a mitzvah, I can talk about it on Shabbos. If I can talk about it on Shabbos, then I can wait by the border on Shabbos. If I can't talk about it on Shabbos, such as if it's not the issue of a mitzvah, it's just, to hire workers or to gather fruit, whatever it may be, since I can't talk about doing that on Shabbos, I cannot wait by the Shabbos boundary on Shabbos for it to turn dark. So Abba Shaul, this Mishnah really is a continuation of Abba Shaul, giving an example of what he was talking about. We're talking about here that you're waiting by the Shabbos border in order to be able to take care of the needs of a wedding for after Shabbos. Something you couldn't do on Shabbos and you want to do it after Shabbos. The example given here is to cut myrtle branches, hadassim, to adorn the wedding canopy. The chuppah, they used to adorn them with hadassim branches to beautify it. You can't cut hadassim branches on Shabbos. But I can talk about cutting the hadassim branches down for the chuppah because it's for a mitzvah. Being that I can talk about it, I can wait by the Shabbos boundary for it to turn dark so that right after Shabbos I can go take care of it. So too, I can wait by the Shabbos boundary, take care of the needs of a person who passed away. To bring for him, or actually to make for him, a coffin and burial shrouds. So to get to these materials, you'd have to go past the Tchum Shabbos. So I can't do that on Shabbos. I have to wait till after Shabbos to cross over to go further than 2,000 cubits. But I can wait at the border on Shabbos because it's for the matter of a mitzvah, which I would be able to talk about on Shabbos. Now the Gemara continues on this subject of a coffin and burial shrouds for somebody who passed away. No, or other needs of a person who passed away. Nachri sheve chalin b'Shabbos. A guy brought from outside, from beyond the Shabbos boundary. He brought chalilin. Chalilin they translate as flutes. Now flutes. These flutes were used actually at a funeral. They used to play sad music on it. They used to actually use it, like the crying sound like the flute makes, to actually arouse people to cry. That was part of the process. That was part of the funeral. That's considered honor to the person who passed away to do that. Now, the thing is that the guy brought these chalilim, he brought these instruments, he brought them from outside of the Shabbos boundary, meaning they were beyond the 2,000 cubits. And he brought it from beyond that area. Now, he's not Jewish. He doesn't have to keep Shabbos. The problem is, though, that he brought these things from beyond the Shabbos, how far he can go Shabbos. He brought it from beyond the Shabbos boundary. That means he did something for you that you could not have done. He brought you something from an area that you could not have brought it from Shabbos. Forget about the fact that it's an instrument. You couldn't have brought anything from there on Shabbos. And now he did it for you. Right, and they bring down here in the notes that he doesn't even have to specifically say what he brought it for. It's like that's what they did with these flutes. They were used for funerals, and he's bringing it to where there is a place where there's a deceased person, It's obvious why he's bringing it. So we say, Nachri Sheva Chavilim b'Shabbos, the non-Jew who brought these flutes on Shabbos, Lo Yisbod Behen Yisrael. You cannot use them to eulogize a Jew. Because the rule is, anytime a non-Jew does something for a Jew on Shabbos that you can't ask him to do, but he did it for you, and if you didn't ask him, anytime a non-Jew does something forbidden on that will be forbidden for you to do on Shabbos, he does it for you. We learned previously, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Again, when he's not allowed to do it. So in this case, you couldn't ask him to bring these things. You couldn't ask him to do that. So now when he did it for you, without asking, you're not allowed to use them. Now the Mishnah doesn't qualify for how long. And the halacha is, when we say you cannot use them, it doesn't mean you can't use them forever. It means you cannot use them for the amount of time that it would take him to have done what he did. Meaning, let's say the flutes, it takes an hour, right, to bring those flutes from where he went to here. Meaning it takes an hour to go from beyond the Shabbos boundary to where the flutes are to bring them back. It takes an hour to do. So we say like this, for an hour after Shabbos, he can't use them. So that it should be considered that I didn't benefit, I'm not benefiting from what he did on Shabbos. But once that amount of time passes, then I can use them. So the Yisba Behed not to be able to use doesn't mean you can't use them forever. It means the amount of time that it would take him to do what he wasn't supposed to do, that amount of time you cannot use this thing. Beyond that, you could. So that's what it means he can't use them. Unless it came from a place that was close by. We know he brought them from an area that was within the Tchum Shabbos. Was within the 2,000 cubits. If that's what it was, that means he didn't do anything wrong when he brought it. Wasn't doing any kind of malacha, any kind of forbidden activity on Shabbos. In that situation, then you can use it right after Shabbos. So what about the problem of carrying? So they bring down here in the notes that the reason why there's no issue of carrying, or it didn't mention carrying, is because that if you have to bring something from within the Shabbos boundary, if it's within the Shabbos boundary, then typically it's not going to take that long to bring. So by the time Shabbos is over and everybody gets their act together to actually use these things, it'll already for sure be past the time that it took to bring. So theoretically, you're right. Theoretically, being that let's say he brought it from a public domain, he brought it from an area that didn't have an Erev, so he did a malach, he did a forbidden activity, you should have to wait for the amount of time that it took him to do it. But the Mishnah doesn't bother saying it because once it's that close by, it's within the Shabbos Tchum, it's not, practically speaking, it's not going to make a difference because you'll probably pass that time before you have to use it after Shabbos. Okay, now, Asulay Arin, if they, again referring to non-Jews, made for him, which really here means they made for another non-Jew, an Arin, a coffin, v'chafru loy kever, or they dug for him a grave. So it wasn't done for a Jew, it was done for a guy. It was done for another non-Jew. But it was done on Shabbos. You covered by Yisrael, you can bury a Jew in it. He didn't do it for a Jew. He did it for himself. He did it for somebody else, for another non-Jew. No problem. Even though it was done on Shabbos, no problem. A Jew can be buried in it. The Mishvil Yisrael. But if, let's say, he dug it or he made the coffin for a Jew, lo yikaver by oilamis. You can never bury that Jew in that grave or in that coffin. So again, if he dug the grave or built the coffin for a Jew, the Mishnah says you may not ever use that coffin or grave for that Jew. For that Jew. Now, why here are we saying you can never use it? Just say, like we said before, the amount of time it takes to dig the grave or to make the coffin, once that time passes, you should be able to use it. And the answer is because we're talking about where this was done very publicly. They dug the grave, the guy dug the grave in a graveyard that people passed by. It was in a public area. Or they went ahead and they built the coffin right next to the grave. So then they did this for another Jew and they did it publicly. Once they did it publicly, you cannot let this Jew who passed away and it was done for, you cannot use it for him. Why? Because it's degrading for him. It's considered degrading for him that here it was, that's something that was that the non-Jew made for him. And people know that's not what's supposed to happen. People know that when something is made by a non-Jew for a Jew, you're not supposed to use it. Now, being that it was done so publicly, it became so publicly known that a non-Jew did it for this Jew, it would be degrading for him to actually use it. And therefore, we say that Jew should not ever use it. But another Jew, as you mentioned before, for him, we could wait for the amount of time it takes to do, and then we can use it for him. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Did they use an